Hey, Lawrence here, welcome to Business Beats. Welcome to Business Beats. Welcome to Business Beats, Lawrence here. A standing charge is an expense that you are going to incur when the doors are closed. All right, so if you're a retail business and you shut for 4 weeks a year, what expenses do you incur within that 4 weeks that you still have to pay? Because you've got to even that out across the P&L and across the forecast and across your targeting actually. So try and figure that out quickly. And then your OPEX, operating expenditure. So these are costs that you only incur when the business is churning, when the doors are open, right, and you're making money, because that'll come off your gross and your net revenue.
The business is sustainable because we create money and then we can grow, employ and contribute to more families, more people. And our community, we can give more away this year. We're looking to give away, $250,000 and $500,000 worth of education programs to charities. And I think that's awesome. If I was broke, I could not do that, correct? Like, think about that. If I was broke or our company made no money, I could not do that. Just think about that for a little bit. Absorb that. I think that's important to understand.
Or I also call it Bambi walking through the forest, right? Poor Bambi. Remember Bambi? And Bambi's got a red dot on her forehead waiting for someone to pull the trigger, right? So you've got to just stay out of the forest. From $0 to $500,000 in 6 months, doing something you're passionate about, click here, right? Like, there's a lot of that stuff. It's got a picture of a young guy or girl standing in front of an orange Lamborghini, right? All of that is bullshit. None of that is real. They probably don't even own that Lamborghini. And even if they do, they didn't do it in 6 months, right? A business has to be sustainable and to operate well, to be able to pay everyone salaries, to give them promotions and create an environment and a company with a great culture that can go out and help people and have contribution, right? It takes revenue to do that. So you have to focus on the things that no one wants to talk about. You're passionate about something that you're succeeding in and that you're good at, right? Like, it's all the stuff around that is the passion. It's not that, in my heart, I want to do this. Well, that's great. Really, for me, it was all about, there were lots of things I like, and I'm a creative as well. And I tried to be successful in that, and I failed, right? So I was in that 97%. And I failed big time. I tried really, really hard for many, many years. And that passion just waned for me. It's harder than I thought it would be. And I've failed a lot, right? But you have to get up and then you have to just keep going. And here's the thing, you have to take all the shit. You are responsible for everything in your company. Whether you want to accept that or not, it's on your shoulders, right? So that can be pretty damaging to some people. And I do speak to founders who suffer from mental hardship because running a business is so difficult and they don't know what they're doing. But one of the worst things I think is isolation, is that you're sort of on your own. So if you don't know how to handle the punches, you get bruised very quickly and it lasts for a very long time.
Putting money in the bank is the worst thing that you could do for money. And get 1% on it, 2% on it over, 10 years? Like, that's ridiculous. Here's one thing that money wants. It wants you to move it out of your pocket, out of your bank account, and it wants you to put it somewhere that creates energy and creates more money. That's what you do with it. Like, that's what you do with money. You've got to move it. It's a deal flow, right? Like, you've got to move money through a flow. And what happens is, when you do that, it tends to increase, right? It grows, right? So, I take $10 that I earn, I give it to someone, they turn it into 20, they give it to someone else who turns it into 100.
Where does your passion lie? And is it more than one? Is it plural? Is it passions? Like, do you have multiple passions? And then how do you select the one that you think you could create a life upon, right? So there's a whole bunch of stuff to consider there. Do something you're passionate about. It's that people say it as a frivolous comment in a conversation, certainly on a social media post, right? And then it gets people thinking, and they go home and speak to their husband or their wife, and they go, you know what, I'm really not happy with my job. I'm gonna go do something I'm passionate about. Big mistake. So now I'm across 4 different verticals in my day, and everything is moving forward. I get a little bit of flexibility. I get to do different tasks. I'm not doing the same repetitive thing over and over again. It frees my mindset up a little bit, so I get to work on a creative project, then I have to go into an administrative project. So it keeps me relatively balanced. And then when I get to the end of the week, I've completed 5 or 6 projects instead of 1. I've completed 5 or 6 projects instead of 1 project. Because if I was chasing the shiny object and working on 1 project for 4 days, I'm not going to get anything else done. get out of obscurity and move into attraction. So attract customers, whether they're walking into your bricks and mortar shop or you're advertising online and you're getting more clicks through to your website. You're increasing lead count, you're selling more units for the same cost, or you're not doing all the marketing and putting all the money into spend, but you're just going to increase the margin. So you might go from $1,000 to $1,100 or $1,200. Now, to do that, you've got to do your market research. And all of a sudden they see something, a shiny object, and then they get involved in it. And then it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon and they're still doing it. Here's a really bad thing that can happen. They come in the next day and they continue to do it. Now, here's a problem. If it's not on the strat and no one sees it and they did it for a week and there's a 30-day outcome results that you have to achieve, that's getting close to a third of the time is being focused on something that isn't on strategy. Whew, that's pretty dangerous. I have this rule of 3%, right? So I've taken that rule from real live data that's been compiled over a period of time in a commercial context, like companies like Deloitte's and KPMG. They release all these white papers and all this research, right? When I look at those numbers, they normally run on this algorithm of 3 to 5%. Success and fail rate, they're two different things. That lower percentile is about success.
I'm talking about in terms of if you can really scale economics and money and make lots of it, you can have more people. That's my point. More money, you can have more people. And that's just the bottom line. There's no way around that, no matter what anyone says. The whole scarcity stuff around money is bullshit. And I think the sooner people get rid of it and start to open up and talk about money, what they want to earn, what they are earning, why they can't afford good education for their children, you need to talk about it, put it on the table. There's that old adage that, what's the number one thing that breaks up a marriage and a family? Do I even have to say it?
That fairy tale founder startup business story, I don't actually think exists. I tell you what, you couldn't be fucking further from the truth. It's stressful, it's frustrating, you've got to be pretty resilient. And I think if you're listening to guys on Instagram who are doing that, you should stop and recalibrate, right? Because it's probably one of the hardest things that you could do. I should be laser focused on those tasks and not really let anything distract me. Someone comes to my office and says, hey, look at this. I go, wow, that's super interesting. And then we end up standing there and talking for 30, 40 minutes about it. And then the next thing you know, my whole day has gone in a different direction. And it happens all the time, Now, here's the dangerous thing. Multiply that by 50. If one person is doing it in your business 1 or 2 times a day, and you have 25 staff, let's say if that happens 50 times.
Make bad people. People are just innately bad, then they get money and then it amplifies that, right? Like there's nothing wrong with money. Money is inert. Like I've got $100 in my pocket right now. It's just sitting there, can't do anything. But if I pulled it out and I spent that money and bought 14 muffins and a cup of coffee, I'm get fat, yes. But also I'm creating action and activity and flow, right?
So if you want to do something you're passionate about and you're already up against it, where 3% of people who start businesses in the first 5 years succeed, how do you think you're going to turn something that you're passionate about into a high percentage of that? Because you get up every day and you're more motivated? Motivation is not a strategy. And by the way, it doesn't last very long. I've spoken about that before. There's a conversation that I have quite frequently about the long path, right? It's an old Stoic philosophy, which I really buy into, because I think when you take the long path, the appreciation and the respect of what you succeed in or what you earn is greater than if you take the short path, right? So what that means is taking the long path is the harder journey. The harder journey creates more intelligence and more exposure and more experience, and it creates obstacles for you that you will need to overcome to get to where you need to get to. The thing about business is very emotional. You know nothing, and if you've read all the business books on the planet, they will help you, don't get me wrong, that'll give you some intelligence, but if you can't deal with stress and pressure, don't go into business for yourself. Now, I've said this many times before, and I'm pretty passionate about it. What's that saying? If you can't handle the heat, stay out of the kitchen. No! There's one for the chefs. It's difficult. It's really, really hard. And it's harder than I thought it would be. And I've failed a lot, all right? But you have to get up and then you have to just keep going.
Scarcity. Let's start there. People don't want to hear it. Great. I just know that people don't want to talk about money. You know why? Because they don't have any. And what it does is that creates a psychological insecurity, which we call scarcity. And they say things like this to themselves. Well, I don't need money to be happy. Well, that's ridiculous. Money is not about being happy. I know plenty of people that have no money who are miserable and plenty of people who have lots of money and who are miserable. But I'll tell you what, I'd rather be rich and miserable in business class than in economy.
Before you purchase a business, you need to know where you're going to head with it. You have to have some sort of strategy wrapped around that. You need to understand the P&L, the balance sheet, what the business plan looks like, what stock, inventory, dispatch. So understand all the variables and all the elements around it. Really, really critical to get that right.
Lots of people don't want to talk about it. In society, people don't want to talk about it. When I grew up in my family, I grew up in quite a poor family in a small town and farming community, and people hated talking about money. They didn't want to talk about it. I remember my father and my mother saying to me, save your money for a rainy day. That's the worst advice ever. And by the way, people who have scarcity around finance and money and economics, don't ever listen to them because they have no idea what they're talking about. They'll lead you down the wrong path.
Doing something I'm passionate about could be a problem for me. Now, I think it's okay to do something you're passionate about, but here's my take. I think that comes later. I really think you need to work hard before you even get to that point, right? So you need to work hard before you get the opportunity and the luxury of doing something you're passionate about. Like, think about that. Like, you can't just wake up one day and say, I hate my job. I am very passionate about baking pies, so I'm just going to go and bake pies. Like, what does that even mean? Be careful of burnout. I think there's moments of higher frustration and lower frustration and zero frustration, but I'm certainly not like a burnout guy. But if you feel like you're a burnout person, and you could be, which is no harm, no foul, that's cool, you need to really start to unpack what you're doing in 70 hours. That would be my advice. Because what it tells me, if you've been doing 70 hours for 12 months and the business is not growing or moving further ahead, that means you're doing the wrong thing. You have to make them aware of it. I think you have a responsibility to do so, because what will happen is your productivity and efficiency will drop dramatically, and then moving towards your strat outcomes for the quarter, you don't achieve them. And then it hits the bottom line, right? So your business starts to move into decline and you're trying to figure out what's going wrong. Because if you're not conscious of it, you don't see it, so you don't know that it's there. And you think it's about sales and marketing. When in actual fact, it's about managers getting distracted with things that they shouldn't be involved in. So the first thing I would do if I purchased a business without knowing too much about business is seek a good accountant, go through the P&Ls. That would be my first go-to, right? I want to understand what the expenses of the business are, what are your overheads are. So standing charges and operating expenses, those two variables. I personally like to know that. What I understand about entrepreneurs and business owners is that when they choose a number, and it's a nice rounded number, they have put no thought into it. Like, how much do you want to earn? $1 million. Okay, great. Exactly $1 million, is that correct? I'm just gonna do a hypothetical here. So if you're selling iPhones, right, you have a unit price. So there's two things that you can do. You can sell more of the unit price, or you can sell the same amount of the unit price as the P&L dictated last year, but increase the margin on it, right? So what that means is you have to lift prices.
So, we're an 8-figure business, sort of 9-figure business over time. What if we could get to 250 million? Like, seriously, how many people could we help? Like, that's the driving force here behind the money, right? It's not because I want to go buy a Lamborghini or Ferrari. Well, I can't get my kids in that. Like, what's the point? But, I think there's an element of being in the right position as well, looking at it through the right lens. We work with young businesses, young entrepreneurs, people looking to 10x, right? Move towards prosperity, whatever that may look like. And hey, by the way, that's what money is. It's prosperity. That's what people are chasing.
Don't be a founder if you're not prepared to take any responsibility, because what will happen in that environment is you'll break, right? Because it's pretty tough and it's pretty lonely. Businesses, communication. If you can't build a team successfully, it'll be tough. Most people get promoted or go into business without the right communication or psychological acumen. They haven't done any formal qualifications around communication, EQ, emotional intelligence, and all these types of really, really important verticals that most people don't really talk about, where people just can't run around a business and do whatever they want because they're paid to do a job, so they need to do that job, right? And they need to be held accountable to that job, and they need to do it to a standard that the company requires. Look, I hope you found something that you liked or that you think may work for your business. Love to hear any comments if you got them, just drop them through. If you haven't already, click the subscribe button. Really appreciate you watching. and look forward to speaking to you next time. Thanks.